If running a cleaning business feels tougher lately, you're not alone. Rising fuel costs, supply chain pressures, and ongoing staffing challenges have turned everyday operations into what feels like a constant uphill battle. But according to sustainability expert Steve Ashkin, the companies that are winning right now aren't relying on gut instinct, they're relying on the data. And it's my privilege to welcome Steve Ashkin to talk about this today, to dig into something that he's very familiar with because he just wrote it. An article called Navigating the Storm: Why Good Data is Your Business Playbook. Steve, that sounds like a book, but it's an article.
Probably should be a bit.
Should be a book. No, I like it. Interesting headline. I think that'll get some interest. So let's talk about it. Dig into that a little bit. What is behind the article and why did you write it?
In talking to my clients and friends and colleagues, this is just a tough period for people in business. There's just so much uncertainty and so much pressures from the increasing cost of fuels to uncertainties about product related and supply chain stuff and issues with labor and on and on and on. And not just in our own companies, but among our customers. So a lot of people are just not making decisions. They don't know if they should invest. They just don't really know what to do. So that's really what's behind it. If we're really going to help our company succeed, we need to make decisions. And actually, not making a decision and putting off a decision, candidly, is making a decision, right? So, to make good decisions, we just need more and better data. None of us have a crystal ball, and there's no guarantee that a good decision will result in a good outcome or what have you. But data can help us have more confidence in the decisions we make. So that's the advice I've been giving to my clients. Let's sit down, let's really understand what's going on, and not just looking at a P&L or, how we're performing this year compared to last year or what labor costs are. Not just looking at historical information, but how do we really think about the information that will help us make better decisions going forward?
So thank you, Steve. So in the article you wrote, let's talk about ESG as a framework. Can you expand on that for us in today's episode?
Well, the first thing I want to say is to all the listeners, please understand that this is not about politics and it's not about the science of climate change and all these other things. This really is just about how do we think about the future? How do we think about things that will affect our companies, that will affect our bottom line? How do we think about risks? So, for example, when we think about, well, what happens if there's a change in immigration policy? What happens if there's a change in tax policies? What happens with all these different things? How do we actually have sort of a framework to think about that? And so what we simply recommend is a framework built around risk from the environment, social or human risks, and also governance, things like what happens with changing legal issues. So I think of ESG as a simple way to sort of make buckets to think about and approach risk assessments and also opportunities assessments going forward. Does that make sense, Jeff?
100%, it makes sense. And for many companies and organizations, they might struggle with what that looks like for them. So best ways to learn is examples. So can you share some examples of how those watching today can use ESG to identify the risks and opportunities that they're looking for?
Okay, so let's do our three big buckets. So the first one is environmental risk. So depending on where you are in the world, or certainly in the US, Canada, wherever you are, let's think about what should we think about if there's a tornado or we operate in a tornado zone, right? There was just recently some tornadoes that just ripped through Texas and just destroyed large areas, right? So if we live in an area that has weather-related issues, whether it's tornadoes or flood-related issues, or here's one, how about extreme heat and cold weather? In each of these cases, there's things that we can prepare for, both for our companies and our customers, to be ready and prepared in the event that these things happen. So, how do we advise our workers what to do if there's a hurricane or a tornado while they're on the job site? What do they do? Do we even spend 5 minutes telling them or thinking about what could happen? How about if they're working in a flood zone or in a heat zone where it's going to be 110 degrees and we're going to be doing window cleaning, or we're going to be doing landscaping, or we're shoveling snow when it's 12 below zero? Are we spending even a few minutes understanding what the risks are for our business and for our customers so that we have the right training for our workers, we're providing the right safety equipment, and we're educating them enough to protect them from these kind of issues? And then, of course, all these other things too. So there's new climate laws, there's new issues related to fuels and other things driving up our costs for gasoline, and transportation is driving up the cost for products and equipment. How do we spend time just thinking about what alternatives and options and threats and opportunities to our business as related to environmental stuff? And then we can go on to the social area. The same thing, our biggest cost for our cleaning contractors is labor. Hiring workers, retaining workers. How do we find ways to think about, well, what happens if the cost of labor goes up? What happens if there's other things related to our people to make sure that we can retain them and keep them in the future? What happens if there is some kind of issue? And how do we think about our various customers if we don't have labor to clean all the buildings or clean all sections of the buildings? Are we thinking through enough to say, these are our critical customers, or these are the critical areas in the buildings that we clean? So if we have a labor shortage, we can make sure we're protecting the occupants' health, and we can make sure we're protecting their assets, right? What are the critical operating areas in the companies, or in our clients' companies, so that we can make sure we're caring for them, right? That doesn't really cost a lot of money, but could be really helpful to our clients to know that we're paying attention to these issues and we're prepared to care for them and to protect their companies. And the same thing exists in the governance area. You know, we have new laws that are coming up. In California, there's two Senate bills, Senate Bill 253 and 261, where our large customers are going to have to report on climate impacts. You know, is that a risk to our business? If you don't do business with any companies that are large, that are based in California, or that do substantial business in California, you don't have to worry about it. There you go. You solve the risk assessment. But if you do have clients that are affected by this, you need to think about, would it be helpful to us if we understand what those requirements are so that we could go to our clients and say, yep, we have the data that you want. Does this give us a competitive advantage, or does this help us in the marketplace? I suggest it really does. There's also cities and jurisdictions around the U.S. and, of course, around the world that are requiring energy and other performance requirements for our own businesses. There's issues with changing legal structures, immigration policies that can be a risk to our companies. So all I'm suggesting is that we really think and spend a few minutes going through these things to not only identify the potential risks for us, but also there are opportunities in there to help with our customers, to give them more confidence that we know what we're doing, and to identify opportunities to sell more products and services that could be helpful to them because they're dealing with the same issues.
Thank you, Steve. Interesting. So much to do. Where do they start? What's the bottom line here? As people read your article, as they listen to what you just shared, what's the bottom line?
The simple first place to start is please join ISSA Sustainability Committee. We have 250 people that are working together to help put some structure around this to make it easier for ISSA members to be able to address these issues. And the second part is doing these risk assessments is not that hard or costly. You just really need to spend some time thinking about them. And I get it. Everyone is busy, but our businesses, our success depend on it. It is these details that determine the difference between success and failure. And I really want to encourage people to take the time, use the 3 buckets, start thinking about where they work, what happened to their clients, what's important to their clients, and break it down into those 3 buckets. What if there's these environmental factors and how it could affect their business? What happens if there's other social related issues that could affect your customers and their business? And are there laws, other things from a governance perspective that would affect their customers and your business? Once you sort of do some assessment of that, then you can say, well, what's the probability of that happening, right? And then what's the cost? What's the impact? So that you can do sort of this risk benefit analysis. So things that have a high probability and have a high business consequence, those are some things to start paying attention to. And together we can help you address these things so that it can make your company and our industry more successful.